entrance to the Donner's family starts with her life with Addie, as she herself tells us. I had just graduated from James Madison High School in June 1933. My Aunt Bessie, who I lived with since age 12, was making plans to sail to Palestine for a lengthy visit. Although I had a nice job and a handsome boyfriend in New York, I couldn't bear the thought of her being so far away from me for so long. Whenever she talked about leaving, I would burst into tears. Then, when she was almost ready to go, she decided to take me with her. I was filled with joy. I didn't even have a suitcase though. In just one day, Aunt Bessie bought me luggage and everything I would need, and the two of us sailed away. We spent 2 months in Tel Aviv, 2 months in Jerusalem, then some time in Haifa, a total of 7 months. We journeyed back to America on a huge Italian ship, the Roma. Very soon after we set sail, we were sitting on deck listening to a concert. A gentleman sat down next to us and offered us his program. That gentleman was Addie. He was a salesman traveling on business. We couldn't speak directly to each other because I didn't speak any German and he didn't speak a word of English. Aunt Bessie was our interpreter during the whole 2 weeks we were together on and off the ship. We were never alone for even a second. Aunt Bessie and Addie got along famously from the beginning, and it's hard to believe, but Addie put me on a pedestal right from the start. I found out much later that he had confided in his traveling companion that he knew he would marry me from the day we met. When someone loves you so much, it's just plain wonderful. Addie was invited by Aunt Bessie to sit at our table for meals, and day after day she asked him every question under the sun. Addie bought me an amethyst ring on the ship's gift shop. I found out later that he had to borrow money from his friend to pay for it. He gave it to me and considered that we were engaged, although I certainly didn't realize it at the time. Addie got off the ship in Naples. We said our goodbyes. He would return to Vienna. I would return to New York. He was 31 and I was 18. Who could have imagined how it would turn out? Unbeknownst to me, he had ordered flowers for my stateroom, so many flowers that you could scarcely open the door. The whole thing was like a fairy tale. I had felt like nothing before. He was treating me like a queen. I just had to love him. By the way, that was the first time he bought me flowers, and also the last. When Addie got back to Vienna, he immediately hired a teacher and started learning English. Because he was so busy working all day, he used to study at night in the bathtub. Once the English book even fell in and got all waterlogged, but Addie didn't give up. 6 weeks later, after he had learned a few English words, he came to America and stayed with my cousin Sylvia Nadelman, Aunt Bessie's daughter. 6 weeks after that, we were married in the Nadelman home in Great Neck. The date was August 16, 1934. Addie had only one friend at the wedding, the only person he knew in New York. I had learned a few words in German by then, but all in all, we communicate mostly through the language of love. Addie called me his Mona Lisa and continued calling me his Mona Lisa always. We spent a 3-day honeymoon in Atlantic City and then headed for Vienna, where I began a brand new life with a brand new husband and a brand new family in a brand new country with a brand new language. We arrived in Vienna in a brand new car, a very flashy Studebaker, which all the Donners flocked around and admired. The first 2 family members that I met were Joseph and Motke. They were wonderfully warm to me. I was showered with flattery. Motke used to say I was too beautiful to look at. Can you imagine? I became pregnant in late September and Sylvia was born on June 28, 1935. My beloved Aunt Bessie came to Vienna during my pregnancy and stayed for several months to help me after I gave birth. Every Friday night, the whole family gathered at Baba Yeti's house for dinner. Every Sunday, we spent at Manya and Jacob's gorgeous villa. Paul was born 9 months after Sylvia at the same hospital. As soon as she could walk, Sylvia entertained the family at every occasion, singing, dancing, and making jokes. Our life was wonderful, surrounded by family, love, and many comforts. In March 1938, everything changed. Hitler arrived in Austria. We were having our weekly Shabbos meal at Baba Yeti's when we heard the terrible news on the radio. Each couple left Baba Ita's home separately that night. She was afraid for all of us to be together on the street. The next 3 weeks were a nightmare. It is still very painful for me to think about, and many things I tried to forget. I remember seeing old Jews on their knees being forced to wash the bridge across the Danube. I remember people being taken from their homes and their businesses. At first, Baba Ita feared for Addie's safety if I were to leave with Sylvia for America. Hitler had said that remaining family members should be jailed. Finally, though, it was agreed that Sylvia and I should go, first by train, then by ship, and with only the $20 the Nazis allowed us, to Aunt Bessie's house in Queens. We remained there for 2 months until Addie joined us, thank God, and we began the next chapter of our lives in the United States. Trudy Shepard writes about her first impressions of Dorothy on those first years in the United States. When I was 9 years old and in 3rd grade, I thought Dorothy was the most beautiful woman in the world. It was not Greta Garbo, Janet MacDonald, Merle Oberon, or Marlene Dietrich. I tried to convince my friends in 3rd grade that I had met the American beauty queen, who lives in the neighborhood and who wheels her baby daughter around the block every day. If they waited with me after school, they might catch a glimpse of her. We tried for 3 days in a row, and it worked on the 3rd day, and they too agreed. In 1939, when we arrived in the United States on the Queen Mary, I was the first to spot Dorothy and Sylvia from the deck. We stayed for the first days with Dorothy and Addie in St. Albans. Even though I was a poor eater, everything Dorothy cooked was delicious and I ate it. She was always a wonderful hostess, later with her garden parties on Aberdeen Road. I finally found out what made her stuffed cabbage better than everyone else's, and I still make it that way today. Tells us, Addie and Dorothy visited Montevideo every year. They stayed at Josef and Stella's home. They made trips to Punta del Este and stopped at San Rafael. On one of those trips, in 1973, Addie had a severe heart attack, and he passed away. In his will, he asked to be buried in Tel Aviv, Israel. Grandma spent a lot of time in Israel after that. We spent a lot of time together in the Sharon. We celebrated birthdays together. 5 years after that, my grandma was loved again and married again. Bunyo Marcus integrated the family and not only became a husband to grandma, also a grandfather to all of us.